Hello and welcome to this episode of Beyond L&D, and I'm thrilled to be talking today to Lorraine Charles. Hi, Lorraine.
Hi.
We've been trying to get this together for some time now.
Yeah.
Lorraine is a research associate with Cambridge University, but also director and co-founder of NAMAL, which is an organisation that we're really here to talk about today, because usually with Beyond L&D, we talk to people from the world of L&D who are using their L&D skills beyond the obvious just L&D corporate training, learning, development. Whereas with you, Lorraine, it's like the opposite, is because what you're doing is you're bringing L&D to a whole community of refugees actually, to help them with remote work and to earn some money and support their host countries as well and communities. So we'd love to know more about that. So just first of all, tell us about NAMAL.
So NAMAL's been sort of the ideas been brewing for a long time. I've done lots of research on refugee education and employment. And what really got me thinking about this is I did a project and looking at employment for refugees in Jordan and Turkey, and I realized that one of the big barriers is just lack of opportunity. Yes, there were protectionist labour market mechanisms that prevented refugees from working remotely, but there were just lack of opportunities. And I worked remotely for a number of years, and I thought, for me, it's very powerful to have to work remotely, not having to depend on the labour market where I live. So I thought, well, this is something that refugees can easily do. And because of the communities where they live, there just aren't enough jobs. So this is where the idea started. How can we bring the global community to support refugees where they live? And I was introduced to someone else, my co-founder, who was thinking the same things, but thinking the same things, but from slightly perhaps different perspectives. And we're connected by UNHCR, a friend of mine, because she lived in Jordan at the time when I was living here. We're connected. And we started our conversation. And after the first hour, we thought, right, this is what we need to do. We need to give refugees the skills to be remote workers. Because we both worked remotely. She worked for an organization where she always worked remotely, and so did I, doing different projects. And as an academic, you often work remotely with people in different parts of the world, writing papers and that sort of thing. So for me, I've had lots of experience, and I realized it's not easy to work remotely. It's hard. I learned the hard way, with technology, with how to communicate with someone who speaks different language, different culture. It's not easy. And for refugees, it's even more difficult because for us, we come from a learning environment where we're used to working with different people, quite fast-paced and working and education environment. And when I did my MA, a lot of it was sort of, distance. So I was living in the Middle East, and I was doing my MA in the UK, and so also when I started my PhD, which I haven't finished, disclaimer, again, even though you are present at the university, your work is wherever you're doing your research, and at that time my research was the Middle East. So I was used to the whole idea of not being in the same place as the people I'm working with. But I had the skills, because I developed the skills over the years. And this is when I thought, right, we need to do this for refugees. And then looking at the remote work ecosystem, I suddenly fell into the ecosystem where we met and realized there's a whole lot of people doing what we were doing out there. So there were organizations teaching people like you or I how to work remotely. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I can just partner with these organizations. So our amazing partner is called Workplaceless. And they have a program that teaches people like you or I, regular people, to be remote workers. So we formed a partnership and we'll adapt their curriculum to the refugee context. Because of course, a lot of the content is for people in sort of, conventional environments. And I know the whole idea of remote work is a young male, a young millennial. That's what people perceive as the sort of idea of a remote worker on the beach in Thailand or Bali with your laptop. But really, a remote worker can be anyone. And this is where Workplaceless and I formed a partnership, to create this, to create this entity. But more than that, a lot of people have been talking about remote work as the silver bullet to help refugees with employment. It's not the silver bullet. It's hard to work remotely. So not everyone can do it. But one thing that we think important is when refugees do have the skills, so we're going to train refugees who have the technical skills, whether it's coding, translation, app design, being a virtual assistant, a teacher, but give them the soft skills. but it's still not very easy. We can't just give them a laptop and say, here, off you go. We have to really scaffold their remote work journey. So through the training, whether it's done as a standalone project or implemented with a technical training partner, a coding bootcamp or whoever, after the training is completed, we will support them throughout their, the first year or two of their remote work journey. Our other partner, which I won't say the name yet because we haven't officially announced our partnership, will provide the refugees the language tuition. So as well as having the soft skills training, they'll have a personalized tutor where they can have support for the English language needs throughout the first few years of their journey. So not only will we support them through mentorship, they'll have language support so that when they're with the teams, working with their companies, they are fully supported. And I'm in conversation with another company, hopefully they'll agree, I'll send this to them so they'll agree, that works with the teams, because we don't want to put all the focus on the individual, on the refugee. The teams where they're, who they're working with also need to understand that they have to do a really have a strong onboarding process. Yeah. They really have to understand that the person they're working with, yes, I'm sure they're used to work with people from different cultures and different languages, but this person is in a very difficult circumstance because they've had to flee their home. They could be living in a permanent residence, but they aren't in their home country. They had to flee their home because of the conflict. But also, I also want the organizations to realize that a refugee is only a political label. It doesn't degrade the skills they have, the experience they have. It's only a political label because they've had to flee their country because of something which has happened, which is beyond their control. And it could really happen to anyone. It could happen to any one of us. We're just lucky that, so far it hasn't happened in Europe and, or wherever we live, but it could happen to anyone. So I just feel it's important to have the organizations where they're joining, the teams which they're joining, to understand their context. So that's why we want to work with the refugee to make sure they have all the skills. They've got the soft skills, they've got the technical skills, they've got the language skills, but also there must be some focus on the team which they're joining to make sure that they are fully supportive of the person coming into their team. So that's kind of the world the ecosystem we envision.
Wow, I've got so many questions.
No, please, go.
Where do I start? Well, first of all, so I would consider myself a remote worker and work virtually with people all over the world, suppliers, clients, colleagues, all of that. So I've always, for many years, I've been really aware of the whole advantage of remote working. But until we started to talk, I'd never considered the whole refugee community. And when I say community, that makes it sound small. We're talking global. Yeah. We're talking millions of people, aren't we, here?
Yes, we are, yes.
That we could tap into. And, you said that, organizations would need some support. And I absolutely agree. I think it's a great idea to be able to make the best of that working relationship with refugees. But I think a lot of people, me included, really, really, really don't understand what a refugee looks like, what their life is like. And I guess there's no one, this is a typical life of a refugee. But can you give us some insight into, let's take some of this, like Syrian refugees in the UAE where you are. What's life like for them now?
Well, I mean, in the UAE, there are no refugees here because the refugee doesn't exist as a term of migrant here. But the Syrians who are here have work visas like I do.
Okay.
But they're vulnerable. The ones I will focus on initially are the ones in Jordan, Lebanon, not Lebanon so much, Jordan and Turkey and Iraq. So again, as you say, there is no particular stereotype of a refugee. A refugee is someone who had to cross a border because of conflict or because of climate change or because of persecution in their home country. So if we look at the Syria crisis, before the war, 20% of Syrians had university degrees. So it was a pretty educated population. So they do come with skills. Yes, the education was in Arabic, but a lot of the more educated Syrians do speak English. What do the lives look like? Again, vast difference. Yeah. So because of the type of work I'm thinking about, initially my target are the more educated ones, the ones who had been to university before the crisis, or the ones who managed to go through university whilst being a refugee. And also considering, the crisis is going, this is 2020 will be the 10th year, I think, 9th, 10th year of the crisis. So there's almost a whole generation of people who finished, who didn't finish high school, who would have been at university, during the time of the conflict. So a lot of people have sort of missed out. But the international community has done a lot, providing lots of training. And this is really, and the partners we'll work with, some great coding boot camps. So providing refugees the training to be software developers, app developers, coders, whatever, that, all those technical skills. So those are the ones we look at. Their life. So when people fled, initially fled, of course they didn't expect to flee for the duration in which they had. So a lot of people use their savings to rent apartments in Amman or in Beirut or in Istanbul or Gaziantep. There's a big community in Gaziantep as well. But of course, after years, their resources did run out, and a lot of refugees do work, but because of the restrictions, they work mostly work in the informal sector, which means low wages, underemployed, and just the conditions under which they work are questionable. So there is talent, but the talent isn't quite being utilized in the communities in which they live. I would say Turkey perhaps does the best job, because Turkey has the most lenient rules in terms of allowing refugees to work. So refugees can get work permits in Turkey, but there's a quota of one Syrian for 10 Turkish nationals employed by a company. So this means that a lot of refugees still do work informally because these barriers are still quite great. But Turkey does allow entrepreneurship. So there are a lot of Syrian entrepreneurs doing work in Turkey. So Turkey has welcomed many Syrian businesses. It's hard to say what the average refugee looks like, because Palestinians who've been exiled for over 70 years still consider themselves refugees, even though they look like you or I, they speak like you and I, and they perhaps present themselves as no different to you or I, but they still can't return to the place which they call home. So
it's dangerous, isn't it? It's dangerous to stereotype a refugee, because
it's dangerous. Yes,
like any population, there's complete diversity of personality, of value sets, of education, and so you cannot stereotype, can you?
Yeah, we can't stereotype. I mean, the Kosovans were refugees in the 90s, so there is no stereotype. Now Venezuelans are fleeing, and Venezuela is a very rich country. Huge oil resources. Venezuelans they were a wealthy population. Yes, there was corruption, but there was what people would consider the typical refugee, but they can't go back to their home.
Yeah. So yeah, you said because I know your focus initially is the Middle East,
yeah.
But you did mention previously how in other countries around Europe, actually being allowed to work is really challenging in some countries, including the UK. Is that right?
So whilst they're claiming asylum, they can't work. Once they've been given right to be a refugee, then they can work. But even then, there's still barriers that prevents them. So legally, yes, they can work, but often the perception of the employers are like, they can't work because they're refugee. There are lots of misperceptions about. There are lots of organizations doing great things. But of course, when you don't really understand the education background of the person, I mean, at the end of the day, it's wrong. People employ people that look like them and that sound like them. Even if they don't look like them, that sound like them, that they understand the education background. These people in Afghanistan who went to universities and, a different education system, which we don't understand because we never lived, there. So for a lot of people, it's just, they just don't understand where they're coming from. So even in the UK, a lot of refugees are underemployed because it's very difficult for them to break into the labour market there. But a lot do very well. Those that do go back to university in the UK and sort of get trained.
Sorry, my brain's jumping all over the place because there's so much going on. It's so interesting. And so I was just thinking that thankfully at last, there's a lot of work being done around diversity and inclusion in the workforce, and this is stretching it further, isn't it, to realise that it's not just diversity. It's not like the big obvious ones of race, sex, all that sort of stuff. There's more to it, and that's so part of this, I guess, is about raising the profile and awareness that there's this whole ready to go, keen to work population that want to work. And something I read interestingly that you shared with me. So just going back to the Middle East and Syrian refugees, there are 5 million Syrian refugees in the Middle East, and going to your so say 15% of them have, say, degrees, and about half of them are of working age. The potential, if they're earning, say, $1,000 a month even, if you then look at what that brings back into their host community, it's a no-brainer as well, isn't it? It's good for them, it's good for the local community.
Many countries see, the refugee crisis has been a burden. It's not easy to host a large number of refugees. I mean, for Turkey, that has the largest number, they've got a huge population. They were the sort of 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. So the population are refugees of some sort or the other. So it's difficult. And a lot of the international community, money has come from the international community, but a lot of the burden has been on the host community to look after the refugees there. But if there were money coming in, yes, international aid, great. But if there were money coming in where people are working, the global private sector are paying people to work, because that's what the private sector does. People work for them. We talk about direct foreign investment. This is an absolute no-brainer. The global private sector paying people to work. There's money coming into the country, into the host communities. Children can go to school. A lot of the barriers that prevent children from going to school are because the parents can't afford to send them to being sort of preyed upon by the police, because Syrians aren't really allowed to work, than adults. So a lot of families send their children out to work instead of going to school. So if there could be dignified employment for the for the youth, for the older brothers, older sisters, for the fathers, for the mothers, then there wouldn't be a need for children to go out to work.
The benefits are just endless, aren't they?
Endless. I mean, but same for all communities. Yeah. Everywhere in the world. It doesn't matter if you're a refugee or not. If you don't, not working is a loss of human capital. So, and people need to be given the opportunity to work.
Yeah. So a lot of the people that will be watching this or listening to this as a podcast, Lorraine, will be working for large corporates, big organisations. What could they or what should they be doing to support this? Is there anything that they can do?
Yeah, so right now we're in the very early stages. I'm actually part of an incubator to sort of help develop my project, which has been amazing, because it sort of pushes me forward and think, right, I have to get stuff done, because I have so many other things which are going on. So our big needs are, I want to pilot, and I want to do a small pilot, and for that I need sort of $20,000 to pilot. So I need funding, but also more than that, I need companies to commit to hire refugees who have the skills which they need. It is a bigger risk because it is the unknown, but there is no true test of your diversity inclusion policy if you hire someone as different as someone from a different part of the world, from a place which you have never visited. I mean, most people, I'd say the majority of people had never been to Syria. I was fortunate that I've been to Syria, but most people hadn't been to Syria, from a country which you only hear about because of the war. People never really heard about Syria before the war. So it's a big, it is the unknown, but they can be success stories, and we sort of want to create a positive narrative among remote work. Let the remote work community show that we're all stepping up together. We're joining forces to do this, because I feel that going to the regular private sector who don't really do remote work is too big a step. Hire refugee and hire someone remotely, that's too big a step. But the remote work ecosystem where we work, this is what we do. We hire people in different countries. So it's not such a big step for them. So the two things I need are funding and commitment to hire people, form a partnership. We can announce it publicly to say, I am one of the first organizations that are committed to hire refugees, because, we need to change narratives. And also, I'd like a big company to sort of, be the first to sort of set an example, to say, hey, I'm doing it, so can you.
Absolutely. I love your challenge. It's like, are you really serious about diversity and inclusion? Then this is a great way of showing that, isn't it? Get behind this, show your support, show your workforce that you're really serious about this, and make it.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, there's been so much talk about it with the international community. Everyone's talking about remote work. The UNDP's got a project, looking at remote work, but no one's doing anything. And I feel, no, there's no action on the ground. Yes, there are lots of, small initiatives, but I want to sort of create a more global narrative. And also, no one is really talking to the private sector. And I know, because I'm talking to them, and they all say, wow, that's a great idea, we never thought about it. Yeah. So all of these projects, which are, talking about remote work, the international community, they're talking amongst themselves. And yes, it's easy for us to talk in our own echo chamber, because it's convenient, it's easy, we all believe the same things. But when you actually speak to someone that never thought about it, and for me, the biggest challenge is if I get someone who's kind of resistant to hiring a refugee, I think I've really been successful. If the organization was like, oh my gosh, why would I do that? I really want people to say, yes, this is a good idea. I want to put my money behind it. I want to put my workforce behind it. Because in a way, it's the right thing to do. We've been blessed with, we've all been blessed with our education, our family. I feel very lucky that I live here. I've got two amazing kids. I've got a good, I have good education. I'm smart enough to sort of make things work. Why don't I use my creativity to sort of make things better for other people?
So, okay, where does all this come from then? A question I always like to ask Lorraine is, so think of you as a kid, Lorraine the child. Can you tell us anything about your personality, or maybe your influences that have influenced what you're doing right now? Any connections?
So I guess two things. My family always spoke about politics. At Christmas dinners, at Easter dinners, politics was always the topic of conversation. And I did sciences at high school. So I was interested in politics, but I was studying maths and physics, and I did my first degrees in science. But we were always surrounded by politics because my family always spoke about it. So, so I was always aware of what was happening in the world because of my family. So, I knew about South Africa, I knew about Palestine, because we spoke about it. And, so I was always very politically motivated, politically minded. And the second thing was, my grandmother was an amazing woman. She did lots of, so in Trinidad, where I grew up, she founded the first school, the school nutrition program to help underprivileged children who couldn't afford food for school. So she started that.
Amazing.
And she was a force of nature. I mean, she did lots of amazing work. My grandfather was a doctor, so she had the privilege, to do all of these things, because she didn't need to worry about looking up, about paying for her, to look after her family. She did amazing social work. That was what she dedicated her life to. And so did my grandfather. He used to say a good doctor is not a rich doctor. And he used to treat people for free prescriptions, whatever. If anyone knocked on his door needing help, he would always help them. So I guess I've come from a family where we give service. We sort of help the community because we're able to. And in my 20s, a woman who's like my second mother now, and she did a lot of stuff for refugees in the Refugee Council in London at the time. And she is still an inspiration for me. We're still, as I say, she's like my second mother. I see her every time I'm in the UK. I stay with her. She is a real inspiration. And I think these women at sort of certain points in my life sort of just made me realize what I wanted to be.
It's like they've created a reputation that you feel you need to live up to that as well.
You do need
that inspiration, and for your kids. And you said earlier, it's like, why wouldn't I do this? I've been, lucky enough to have a great education. I'm smart enough to make this happen. So why not? Absolutely.
Yeah. And why not? I mean, someone's got to do it. Why not? If I can do it, I will. I mean, I want to change the narrative. I guess, my sort of 12 or 13-year-old self, I'd say, I want to change the world. How can I change the world? And for me, this is my small part of changing the world, make the world a better place. And, even if this doesn't grow, I want someone to sort of take the idea and, I mean, hopefully my project will grow and be very successful. But I also want to be, to sort of be a model for others, that it doesn't matter how hard things are, because I've had, quite difficult times. It doesn't matter how hard things are. You have to keep, pushing the agenda, keep talking, keep making change, driving forward, because we have to go through so much, many of us have to go through a lot of adversity to achieve what we want to achieve. And I feel that, we need to keep pushing the agenda for us to really, have our dreams fulfilled. And it's not easy, especially as a woman. It's hard being a woman. It's not easy. We're up against, men who have ruled the world for eternity. So it's hard being a woman. And I think as a woman, as someone trying to do something different, I don't want to copy men. I want to use what I'm good at to be better.
Yeah. That is so important. I get involved in quite a lot of like women in leadership programs and opportunities around that space. Yeah. And, what I see some organizations doing is giving women the skills that men have. Like, let's make you a great networker or negotiator and influencer. Yeah. And it's like, no, let's just make a better version of you.
Exactly.
Develop you, whoever you are. And, you said it's hard being a woman, and I wouldn't have it any other way, though. I think it's a great privilege as well, isn't it?
I agree. It's a privilege. And also, I feel like I want to help the young women sort of come through and, and really realize that they can make a difference. And I said to my friend's daughter, I said, it doesn't matter what people think of you. You just be you. You walk into a room, you've got tons of friends. You don't need any more friends. You just be who you are. And you try to be the best.
It's one of my favorite quotes is Oscar Wilde. He says, be you, everybody else is taken.
Yes, very true. So, back to Namal, I wanted to be, I've worked really hard on this. I wanted to be successful. And I feel that I can take it really far. I just need the initial funding and the initial support just to get started. And, I will start in the Middle East, but the Middle East isn't the only place. I actually want to work in Africa as well. So, there's potential to do stuff in Africa for refugees there as well. So it can be big, it will be big.
It will, and you will be successful, I'm sure of it. So for anyone listening in, let me just do like a quick recap, if I can. Yeah. This is such a huge topic. So fact, there are millions of refugees around the world who have education, they've got skills that they could use, and they could operate as remote workers. What you're doing with Namal is helping them have some of those extra soft skills that you need to be able to work remotely, and then supporting them throughout with their English skills.
Yeah.
But part of that is that organizations need to step up and say, we'll employ you. We'll employ a team of refugees, or we'll have a program that supports refugees. And it really supports diversity and inclusion, and in a big way, great for the workforce too. Also, there's funding required. You need money to make this happen. So anyone listening in, if you or your organisation wants to get involved and help out, please get in touch with me or Lorraine. We'll sort that out. Yeah. But also, people need to start talking about this more. Like you said, how many people have you spoken to, including me, that are like, oh yeah, I hadn't even considered that there's a whole huge workforce that they're to tap into, and it's just a no-brainer. The benefits are just endless.
Yes, I know. The conversation needs to get started.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess there's so much happening in Europe, Europe right now, that the Middle East seems so far away, so problematic. But, we have a responsibility to support humankind. So whatever we can do, I think we need to do it. But I think until the whole idea that a refugee is only a political label becomes normalized, a refugee is no different to you or I.
Yeah.
And we have to deconstruct stereotypes of what a refugee is, because there is no stereotype of what a refugee is. A refugee, both of us could be refugees at any time. We just don't know what can happen in the future. So I think we need to really begin the conversation, keep the conversation going, and realize that there is a potential workforce, and the private sector is becoming more powerful than governments. They certainly have more money than government, more resources, more money than government, so they can do a lot.
Yeah, and they should. Yeah, there's a responsibility.
Yeah, it's a responsibility, definitely.
Well, we'll put all links, any links that you want us to share. So if anyone wants to find out more about the work that Lorraine's doing with Nimal and the team, we'll put all sorts of links for people to find out more about that. And absolutely, let's keep the conversation going, because it's exciting and it's super important. It really is.
Yes, and hopefully in 6 months or a year, when we've piloted, I'll be back and I'll say, this is what we've done, these are our results, we have 50 people employed, we have mentorships. I want to come back with this in a year with a story of success.
Yes.
The private sector stepped up, and we have people to talk about what they've been through.
Yeah, so let's do this again. We'll book a day and we'll have updates. Yeah, and any of you that follow me and the virtual training team on LinkedIn and Facebook, we'll be sharing our updates as well, Lorraine. Definitely.
Yeah.
And Lorraine, it's been absolutely super talking to you, and we will definitely do some more recordings, but you and I will keep talking anyway.
Yes, definitely. We definitely will keep talking. Thank you so much. It's been such a privilege to share what I'm doing with everyone.
Oh, likewise. Thanks, Lorraine.
Thank you.